Okay, so one of the things that I find when learning new things like the internet or programming or even design, it's nice to know where the history of that idea or element came from. And I find with the internet, it's really helpful. One of the reasons it's really helpful is because Tim Berners-Lee, who we'll learn about in a few minutes, who created the kind of the web page as we know it today and the way we're communicating with web pages, he's still alive today. He's still actually a really young man. It's kind of cool because today's people that have impacted this thing that we're learning that's so powerful and so ubiquitous across so many different channels and throughout the world are still somehow impacting and involved in the platform. If you go and learn English or mathematics or physics, oftentimes you're dealing with people that came from multiple generations before, and you're trying to decode and decipher what they were thinking and how they were going through that process. So in this case, it's really cool to know, first of all, that a lot of these people are still impacting and speaking, and you can maybe even see them or in person or online speaking today, live. And then also, it's cool to kind of know where the genesis of the ideas come from, because that impacts how they were made and how people use them. And it often helps to understand why it is the way it is, if that makes sense. And the last thing to keep in mind that we'll be repeating a lot is these were just made by humans. It's very common to look at language and feel like it came from some higher power. They made mistakes and they continue to make mistakes. So sometimes we have to take things at face value and just be like, okay, this does this because they said so. Mainly because it actually creates what it's trying to create. And the real definition and reason why they chose that word or chose that way of doing things might be a little flawed. So that's good to know as well. And to keep all that kind of stuff in mind. Okay, so let's dig into the history of the internet. So today we'll discuss some of the founders influential to the creation of the internet. And this can be a passionate debate regarding the true inception, as everything can be a passionate debate based on its inception, although many reference all the way back to the beginning of mathematics and the lumumba bone. It's the fibula or calf bone of a baboon. And so it's a fossilized artifact found between South Africa and Swaziland, dating back to 150,000 years. And so this is what the bone looks like. It's like tallies that you're looking there, and that's kind of the basis of mathematics, where people were writing down some type of numerical system, starting kind of this intellectual pursuit of mathematics and working with numbers. We could even go further to debate that before math is just communication, right? And you could even go farther to discuss just communication, language, hieroglyphs, things like that. Worth thinking about, worth kind of digging into some of that history. Really interesting stuff and pretty fascinating at the way that humans were thinking all the way back then and how that's led to where we are today, where we're just continuing to build on top of those things and abstract the original tallying on a calf or a baboon. Okay, so there's many people that impacted and created advancements made to create the first computer. These are some of them, and some of them are really intriguing, like Granville T. Woods and the electric telegraph. So Granville T. Woods, I'm going to actually share a web page here, and all these links will be available later as well for you guys to check out. Click on this and check out this very fancy presentation from Granville T. Woods. This is from this website called My Hero Stories Inventors, where it's kind of a funky, cool website, I guess, where people are able to put their own, kind of like a social media website for education or something along those lines. And this was one that came up in a Google search I thought was fantastic. So this is a presentation on who Granville T. Woods was. And so here, his whole career, he earned 60 patents. Of those 60, 45 had to do with the railways or railroad communication, and essentially also the telegraph. So they had a message ahead of the train arriving to the station. And so it gives a person the legal right of ownership to an idea. That's what a patent does. And his inventions was the third rail called a trawler was one of his famous ones. So he actually got into some intellectual scuffles with Edison as well, who was trying to essentially take and own all the patents back in the day. We'd call that like a robber baron, essentially. And he never gave the patents to him, and he had to fight him in court to maintain his patents as well. Check him out. He's a pretty fascinating and interesting character. So what he did is he helped advancements made with the telegraph, which was from Alfred Vail, Joseph Henry, Samuel Morse. Some of you might have heard of Morse code, and that comes from this telegraph. And it looks like this, where you're pushing this device down that makes these beeps that come in kind of dots and dashes. I have another website that I'll show you guys here, which is cool. There's quite a few of them out there, and there's apps and stuff for Morse code junkies. And so here you could play this. And so you could see this, these are the dots and dashes, and then all these dots and dashes equate to the sentence, my dog is better than your dog. No, seriously, way better. So that's what the Morse code translator does, and that's what Morse code sounds like, and what they created to send messages to other people over these channels. Then there's Charles Babbage. So he created computation for calculating tables with less error, and he created this thing called the difference engine. Although it didn't look like this when he created it, it was actually just a document. It was the document that he created. So he created the machine via this document, but never actually was able to visualize it during his lifetime. He designed it on paper, and then they designed it, this intricate, amazing analytical machine later, and used it for programming. It reminds me a little bit of Gaudi. This needs an A on it for Sagrada Familia, who created these amazing architectural plans during his lifetime in Spain and built for this church that until just recently, I believe, just almost got finished. So, and they worked on it for years and years and years to build this amazing church based on the plans that he created. So visualizing just on paper. The next individual is John von Neumann, who created this thing called the Monte Carlo method. This is a Monte Carlo car. He didn't create the car, but the method he did create. He's considered the best mathematician of his time and developed the Monte Carlo method based on the work of Stanislav Ulam. They also worked on and developed the Manhattan Project, which was where the atomic bomb was created. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well in a few minutes. Alan Turing is another huge participant and contributor to the creation of the computer by creating the Turing machine and theories of artificial intelligence. So let's check out some of his stuff here. So he designed the programming of the world's first commercial computer. He's considered the father of artificial intelligence, definitely in thinking as well, where he was thinking all the way back in 1935. He's thinking about how machines can be sentient and can think for themselves. And he started creating devices that were really basic and foundational machines back in its time. He also enabled the Enigma to be decoded. The Enigma was the encryption technique that the Nazis used for their submarine boats. And so he was working in, I guess this Bletchley Park was where their like head technology offices were for London. And what he did was he was able to decode and decrypt the messages from these, the Enigma code from the German forces. And they think that it essentially saved the war by 2 years. That's what Winston Churchill claimed, that Alan Turing's work shortened the Second World War by at least 2 years, which is wild, right? So a really amazing intellectual man, although also had a entirely tragic life as well. After creating these amazing inventions, he went on to get persecuted for being gay. And because of that, he committed suicide. And when they went to find his body, there was actually, he took a cyanide capsule, and before the cyanide capsule, he had been eating an apple, interesting enough. So by his side, legend says that he had a bit apple by his side during his suicide. And as we'll see moving forward, it looks a lot like a logo that some of us might find very familiar. Let me, this logo, right? And it's interesting that the logo, the original Apple logo, was also rainbow colored. Steve Jobs was asked about this at a certain period of time and denied that that was the reason why it was created that way. Although Steve Jobs also didn't design the logo itself, so we would have to ask the person that actually designed it as well. Clearly, it was part of it, but so artificial intelligence and mnemonics, and so that logo here can be considered a mnemonic device. And so when we start talking about things like artificial intelligence, um, actually, I think I have to go back here because of my technical errors here. We missed a couple people, so we'll go back for a second. Sorry about that. So here's Turing and his theories of artificial intelligence. And then there's Ada Lovelace, who's considered the first person to create an algorithm processed by Charles Babbage's analytical engine. So what she did was she translated the work of Babbage from French to English and learned the machine really well and added additional details for how it worked. So other individuals could later work with that drawing and specifications in order to develop that analytical engine. Next, we have the Harvard Mark I during 1944. This is what that picture is, and this is how big computers were back then, right? And today, our mobile phones are of course, like 20 to 30 times more powerful than this whole room of a computer was back then, which is really amazing, right? And if we look at things like Moore's Law, which is the expectation that the transistors of a microchip double every year, and the increase of capacity and reduction of cost. So you can see if you look up Moore's Law, it's a principle that every year technology gets more and more powerful, which makes that computer machine that took up a whole room now get smaller and smaller into a watch, right? That's one of the things that leads Moore's Law, or Moore's Law leads to. And then also the cost of things gets smaller and smaller, especially when people are using it more and more, buying more of them and things like that. So, so today it's pretty amazing. And here's this little chart that shows kind of where that technology was created. And you can kind of look at how Moore's Law has impacted the invention and the continuing progress of technology.